Hello, everyone, and welcome to another SDGC review discussion. I'm Derek. I'm joined by Jeff and Justin. What's going on, guys?
Doing well. Having
Excited
fun.
to talk about some robots.
Yeah, big robots.
Big ones.
Big robots. So we are here today to review Armored Core 6. We were granted a review code for the Xbox Series version by Bandai Namco. So thank you to Bandai Namco for providing us with one of our codes. Let's see. The game has been in our hands for getting close to 2 weeks now, if I've got that
Yeah.
right.
Just under about 10 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't have early access or anything, which is why it's taken a bit longer to get to this one. But each of the three of us has played it and taken our time with it. And yeah, this is one that I've personally been waiting on for like a very long time, since well before it was announced. As somebody who fell really big robot fan, obviously, but also fell really hard into Armored Core back in the 360 and PS3 era. Jeff, had you played an Armored Core before?
I had, but it was one of the. Was there just one for the PlayStation 1? I'm pretty sure it was the PlayStation 1 one.
There was a
and
couple, I think, but
Yeah, so I played one of those, but it falls under the category of everything I played on the PS1, like Legend of Dragoon and like Army Men 3D, where it's like I have memories of playing it, but I do not remember what it was like to play. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you could say I'm pretty new to this series. Like, I definitely had no recollection of what to expect based on that.
well, and I think a lot of our listeners will probably be in the same position, right? Like that's some like Armored Core has always been kind of a niche series. Like Justin, had you had the opportunity to play one before now?
Yeah, so I had played several of them like back in the PS2 days. But like
You played a bunch of like the Armored Core 3 series.
Yeah, but like I was pretty young, and it was just me and my friends just trying to figure out how to play them. Mostly, we enjoyed our time with them, but we were too dumb to figure
That's my
out
memory
how to
too.
actually play those.
Staring like an idiot at a stat screen and
Yeah,
I don't know,
like there's still some in this one, but like the old ones, like you really did feel like you had to have like a mechanical engineering degree to be able to build a mech right, and the controls were absolutely ridiculous.
Oh man, see, I didn't jump in until that 360 PS3 era. But yeah, they're famously very complicated, very hard games that are very difficult to control. Famously, a lot of hardcore Armored Core players hold their controller backwards.
The backwards controller thing is still one of the funniest things to me. Every single time I see it, like even though I've known for a very long time people do that, it still gets me.
Like I thought the old Monster Hunter games with the claw on PSP, right?
Yeah.
Like was awkward, but it's crazy. But yeah, Armored Core 6 it's been well over a decade since the last Armored Core game, and we finally have a new title. And I was curious coming into this how the FromSoft of the last 10 years, right, would have grown and changed and taken a new approach to something like Armored Core. And I think, like, not to, spoil anything, but up front, I feel like the answer is they created something a lot more approachable and a lot more modern and easier for regular people to pick up and play. But is still at points extremely punishing, maybe overly so at certain points. How did you all feel about like jumping into this game?
I was actually shocked at how much of an Armored Core game it actually is still at heart. Like it's one of those updates where, they made changes to like how it controls and, streamlined a little bit of the stat stuff, but like they didn't dumb it down to the point where like it loses. Dumb it down, I guess is the wrong word, but like they didn't change it to the point where it kind of loses that same heart that the original series had. It's kind of reminiscent to me of like Monster Hunter World, where it still is very much, this is what this series is. We're not backing off from these core things that made this series popular among certain people, but we are going to make it so that more people can actually pick it up and enjoy it and try to understand it.
Yeah. Jeff, what about you?
It definitely, like, when you pick up the control immediately, it feels like a modern game. Like, the way the mech controls and the camera and everything. I think it makes sense. I think my issue with the initial onboarding is I mean, we talked about it and we'll get into it when we talk about the difficulty spikes and the bosses. But I mean, the boss at the end of that first mission, it's not just a skill check. Like, the main tutorials for the game are presented to you after that. And I mean, this is partly on me for being a dumbass, but there's a point. I played the first mission 3 times because you also can't save during it. And there's a point where it does indicate that you have a left-hand weapon. I did not see that tooltip. Like, so I was fighting it without even knowing that I had a sword. It doesn't mention a sword. It doesn't talk about like, physical attacks. Not like it's basically like, here's how you move, here's how you control the camera, and that's it. And then it presents you with a very tough battle at the end of the mission. So I think, like, from a controls perspective, visuals perspective, like it definitely feels modern, it feels up to date. It was easy to like jump in, and I was, zooming around and killing some enemies, but like just getting past that first hurdle, I think I don't know if it's the old Armored Core or kind of the classic Souls influence there, but it was a rough time. Like, it took me 2 days just to get past that and actually like, okay, and now I can start playing the game.
Yeah. I feel like that first level of this, and it's crazy, right? Because if you're coming into this, I think, as somebody who has no expectations of what Armored Core is, and the game opens up with cryptic, like, FromSoft storytelling that is never going to pay off, right?
Yeah. We'll talk about the storytelling later.
Yeah. But, drops you into the control of this giant, Gundam-like mech. And the first thing it does is kind of teach you to move in the comfort of an area with no enemies. And the movement is incredible. I think the feeling of momentum, of thrusting around with this thing, of using like the quick dash, of, flight, feels very good.
Yeah, like that was one thing that I was really taken with this game, is like the way it feels to control. Like, it still feels like you're controlling a pilot that's controlling a mech. Like, it doesn't have like the same kind of like direct control as I think probably a lot of people are speaking, where it's like expecting, where you're playing as a character that happens to be a mech. Like, it's still trying to make you feel like you are piloting a big machine, but like there's so much finesse and stuff, and it just clicked with me in a way that it feels very different from controlling like an average game, but like it just clicked with me so quickly right away, and really let the game flow in a way that I don't think previous games in the series have.
I think this game has some of the best schmovement, right, for lack of a better term, like that I've experienced in a game in a very long time.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite parts is the I don't know what it's called, but when you're kind of just skimming the ground with the boosters on, like not quick dodging, but it just feels like you're skating on the ground, and
there's like really sparks coming off from where like your mech's like feet are dragging around across the ground and everything.
And you really feel the difference between like a lighter build and a heavier build as you kind of go up or down the scale there in terms of like, okay, this is getting a little bit too slow. But yeah, definitely like every the feedback, like visually and just like control wise, is really good on all the movements for sure.
The weight and momentum behind, because like you can walk without the thrusters on. I almost don't know why you ever would. It's
good if you're in if there's a couple times I was trying to like hang out on top of a building or like walk across a beam or
navigate like a very tight area.
Yeah.
But other than that, you're gonna hit the the B or circle button, right, and turn those thrusters on and just skate. And that sense of momentum of kind of, it takes a moment to get up to speed, and also like turns are not immediate. There's that fraction of a second of delay as it works through the momentum to like counter its, it feels good to move something, and there's a great feeling of weight despite that mobility.
I will say I appreciate that they let you drift in a tank, but I couldn't get the handle of the drifting mechanics.
Ever make it work right, but I've seen some videos of people doing some pretty ridiculous things with wheelies. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But
Do we want to talk about like the customization stuff? Because I feel like there's just a lot to talk about on that front, and it's one of the most interesting things about this game.
Yeah, well, and like Jeff brought up how the movement feels very different between like light and heavy builds, and kind of brought up the wheel feet too. But like one of the biggest parts of Armored Core has always been customization, and Armored Core 6 gives you like you get the opportunity to get a couple free parts early on just by doing some tutorials. But other than that, you were buying parts from the store, arms, legs, weapons, generators, things like that. Jeff, you brought up on the live show just the other night that what's really cool is this is a lot more forgiving than a lot of other FromSoft games in terms of letting you actually like sell back parts not at a loss in order to.
Yeah, for sure. Because I would buy a weapon and I didn't realize at first that like you're buying per arm. So like the Gatling gun is available for right and left arm, and you can't just equip the right arm version of it. And I was like, oh fuck, like now I got to go and buy the left hand one. I was like, oh, I could just switch and sell back my right hand one, buy the left hand one, and I'm not out any money. It's really good.
I am so glad they did that, because I made that mistake a few times too. Because like you can go back and you can grind previous missions and stuff. You need money. Like money isn't really much of a problem. And early on in the game, like especially with some of those like free parts you can get to tutorials, you can sell them to get some extra cash. Later on in the game, you're gonna have to want a wide variety of parts so that you can respec for the given situation.
Yeah.
But early on, you can do that to get money. But yeah, it's so nice because I'm so used to games like, if you sell something, it's like you get 50% max of like what you paid for it. Some games even, a fraction of that. It just makes, especially early on, it's so much easier to just be like, oops, I bought the wrong thing. Let's change it up. And then you can
I think it can be overwhelming, right? Looking at all the different robot like parts and weapons and generators, and et cetera, that are available to you, and not fully grasp like the fact that every individual part contributes to things like weight and energy load makes it feel like you are trying to put a puzzle together. And that can feel overwhelming. So giving people the ability to just sell anything back for what they paid for it means that early on in the game, when people don't have a lot of resources, they still have the ability to experiment safely a little bit.
I will say, when you talked about things like energy load, I found the kind of help in the game for understanding what all the stats are is not super clear. I actually had to go on YouTube and watch a guide for it. Like a lot of them are
the true FromSoft experience.
Yeah, like I figured out pretty quickly AP is health and stuff like that. The one I really struggled with was like things like your energy load and your weight load. There's like a bar at the bottom, but then there's kind of ticks that show you your max and your current. And I still am like, when I'm looking at it, like on the left hand side, you have the part you're looking at in the store, and it moves the bar, but I'm never quite sure what it's showing me. Like I know red means it's like, decreasing, blue means better, but
then you get weird situations where like weight, right? Like a part's weight will be a heavier part will have a lower score in the weight category.
Yeah, like it's going down, but its weight is going up. Like it's reverse. Yeah, you're right.
So there's little things like that might not feel super intuitive.
Yeah, and also towards the end, like I had to pull up like there's like a basic stats menu, which basic is still more stats than I think a lot of games have in when building something. But
I remember you telling me like Derek, you're not when I was streaming that first stream, and you were like, you're not looking at the full loadout. And I hit the button and it expanded the whole thing, and I was looking at it like, oh,
I pull that up every time now because
but like towards the end of the game, especially with like some of the last like few bosses in the game, there were some like little stats, just like tiny little things that you wouldn't think of, that just changing my build just a little bit in like some of those like advanced stats that aren't even on like the basic menu made actually a significant difference in the way my mech felt and worked a lot better in those situations.
The one that saved me was supply efficiency when I figured out what that did.
Yeah,
like,
that
oh my god,
important.
Restoring that energy so much quicker. Huge.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the big ones. But like there's another mission where you're fighting a flying enemy and they fly up pretty high, and the thrusters I had initially they were good for speed and they were good for dodging, but they didn't have much vertical lift. And so that fight, while not being very hard, just by attrition, I lost because I couldn't, get up high enough. And just changing out the thrusters, just that one part to something that would get me more vertical, literally was a night and day difference for how that played. And I really enjoy that aspect of this game, and it plays into the difficulty. And we're definitely going to be talking about that, because I think a lot of people were approaching this thinking it was going to be more like Souls, and it's not. Do not approach this game as thinking it's going to be like the Souls style games that FromSoft has done. It's not. But the game has checkpoints and stuff, and if you die mid mission, you can fully respec your mech to build it for the situation.
Thank God for that, because I think there are missions even early on, like the scaling the wall, right? Where you might want one kind of build to deal with the first chunk of the mission, but then if you can't beat the boss with that build, have the ability to go, okay, well, this is what I needed to get through the first area, but now I need a different set of tools to deal with this boss.
There were some missions.
That.
Yeah, there were some missions where I'd go in planning to lose on the boss because I knew my loadout was not going to be good for a big one-on-one fight, but it was going to be great for dealing with lots of smaller enemies.
And once you start thinking about it that way, right, you become less afraid to use your builds, right, and almost plan for failure. You can almost go, okay, well, based on what kind of mission this is so far, I don't need to worry about what if there's a boss, because I can set myself up for what I think I need right now. You don't have to metagame the mission.
No, it's only if you are going for S ranks that you have to do that, because S ranks you cannot change your loadout.
Yeah, and I think the vast majority,
which means I'm never going to. Yeah, I've S ranked a few missions, but I was like, oh, I really like this game. Maybe I'll go for the platinum. And then literally every single thing seemed like it was, I'm like, oh, this is all reasonable and fun stuff I'll do. And then one of them was S rank every single mission. And I actually got offended.
I think the vast majority of people are just not going to think about this game in that way. I think you're going to find out very early on, most people, that your goal is to survive this game, right?
Yeah. And also this is something, a pet peeve of mine with games that have mission rankings is that, your first time through, you're never going to get a good one. And then it almost feels like the first time you go through, it's like, oh, you got a D ranking or something. This game does not give you a ranking the first time through, which is actually really nice for me. It's just on the replay menu. So it's just hey, you completed your mission. Here is, here's how much money you made. And also one thing, I just want to mention this because it's funny. And also a good comparison to the old games. But you have to pay for, repairs and the ammo that you expend in a mission. Yes. It comes out of your payment at the end. And in the old games, it was very easy to go negative.
Yeah, you could actually go into the negative and lose money on a mission. And it's so much more generous now. The spirit is still there, that if you can find a way to play the game and take fewer hits and use less ammo, you will come out with a higher monetary reward. But I don't even know that it's possible to not make money on a mission.
It is possible, but
you have to do it on purpose.
It's specific. Because I tried. Even on some missions that I tried really hard, I couldn't do it. There's one late game mission that just has a very, very low payout as the the thing, and then you have to fight multiple bosses and stuff in it. That one, you can do it. But even then, at that point, I had millions, and it was minus 47,000 or something. Whereas you could put yourself in financial distress in the old games with stuff like that.
But I think the customization is great. I think it's fun how there's meaningful difference when you swap around different booster parts or different leg parts. I remember trying my first set of reverse joint legs. And the ridiculous springy jumps and dashes you get out of it. It's
and the jump is basically effectively a dodge in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah.
The way the legs totally change up each thing is super cool, because that's something we didn't touch on yet. But the legs are almost the base on which you build the rest of your mech.
Are you building a light, medium, or heavy mech? Are you going for regular legs or reverse jointed legs, or tank treads or like spider legs.
But it like really, like you said, it really changes the way the game plays. Like it's almost like a different game playing with like a tank versus a super light build, or even like the kind of spider legs where you can hover.
They play vastly different.
It's a degree of mechanical
really
difference
cool.
you're not going to be ready for if you come into this thinking this is anything like, you know, other FromSoft games, which again, cannot stress enough is something you need to keep out of your mind, because this is not intended to be robot Dark Souls. This is a fast-paced, like arcadey action game with short, digestible missions.
The missions are like
most.
Like
of them
I did
are
one
pretty
today
short.
that was like I completed it in under a minute. Most of them are really short. There's checkpoints. There's waypoints, and stuff like that. Like a lot of the traditional stuff that people don't expect from FromSoft games is in this game.
Yeah. The one thing that, and this is probably my primary negative to the game, which is also the thing that the piece of like modern FromSoft DNA that feels like it did still make its way in, is some of these bosses are bullshit, y'all. Like, there's no getting around it. Jeff mentioned the helicopter boss in the very first mission is a rough customer for anybody starting the game, especially when the whole first mission is like an exercise in freedom, right? It's you start in this very linear area as you learn movement and take down some basic enemies. Then you get put in a bigger area with multiple objectives, and you're like, okay, no, I'm getting the feel for this. Like, this feels good. And I think your average player will feel good. And then they're going to go fight that helicopter boss at the last objective and get creamed. And I even remember on stream being like, okay, well, maybe this is like, Vanguard, famously the boss of Demon Souls that just
where you have to lose,
wipes the floor with you when you are supposed to lose, and then you will continue past it. And I got just creamed by this helicopter, and then the message popped up that was just like, restart mission, restart from checkpoint, quit game. And I was like, fuck.
And it can go out of bounds where you can't hit it.
Yeah.
It's a little tricky. You need the sword. And yet, like, it's incredibly tricky to actually get up on this big mobile flying thing and hit it with your kind of very strict positioning sword attack.
I think it's something that's a lot easier once you have the muscle memory of playing the game for 5 or 10 hours and you get the dance that you do where, ducking in, ducking out, moving around. But yeah, at that point, it's not intuitive at all.
I've consistently gone back to that helicopter boss and done fine now. But that was brutal at first.
I have since gone back, and like almost every boss that I struggled with, I can usually reliably get down now. I think part of the issue,
Baltius and Sea Spider can still suck my ass, but
those fights aren't as fun. But like you can still reliably get them down.
Yeah.
See, for me, there was only 3, throughout the game that were really like walls, and it was Baltius, Sea Spider, and then the Chapter 4 boss. But the thing is, also, I think part of the big issue with some of those two is that like Baltius and Sea Spider are so early in the game.
Yes.
And then like they are the bosses of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. There's 5 total chapters in the game, and Chapter 3 is like several times as long as every other chapter. So it's like there are these huge walls early on in the game, and then once you get past them, like a lot of the parts because the story refreshes every chapter. And so then all of a sudden, a lot of the parts that you can do, like, oh, I wish I had this one mission earlier because it would have made a huge difference. But like they're so early in the game, like it didn't bother me as much that there's a very hard boss like 90% of the way through the game. Like at that point, it's like, hey, I have a huge variety of parts to work with for changing up my play styles. I know the game very well. It's those those 2 chapter end bosses early on are just a lot to throw at players early in the game.
I also think, and like I'm coming as somebody who has like destroyed the Dark Souls series, right? Like I love those games, but like the DNA of Dark Souls is that it is a struggle to progress, right? Whether you're dealing with the environment, dealing with regular enemies, or dealing with bosses, you are always under stress in those games. That's how they're built to make you feel. And Armored Core isn't like that, right? Armored Core is 90% of the time exhilarating, right? Because of the freedom of movement, because like you go in and deal with a group of enemies and it's a thrill.
And then you get like these one-on-one battles, like straight up duels with like, the other AC pilots.
And those are tough, but you understand that that's like a fight on the same rules as you know?
Because like almost every, like if you see like a regular enemy AC unit, you can eventually get every single part and build your mech the exact same way.
It's the equivalent of it's kind of impossible not to make Dark Souls comparisons because it is so formative. And also it or not, while this is not robot Dark Souls, there is there is Dark Souls DNA in this game, down to like the nature of the story and the obsession with the like eternal flame. But
okay. I mean, can we transition to talk about the story? Or sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
We will in just a moment.
No, I was gonna say I wanted to talk about
because I know you have more on the difficulty to say than the rest of us.
Yeah, like I mean, my main issue with it, and we talked about it. Like the checkpoints are great. The ability to go in and swap out parts mid mission at checkpoints is also great. I think my struggle with the bosses and still my frustration is, I could do everything I could do with my mech. So I'll use Baltius, one of the early-ish bosses in the game, as an example. It doesn't matter what I do to my mech. I played that fight for 4 hours. I know his attacks. I cannot dodge them. Like I'm telling you, I know what the attacks are. I recognize when they're coming. I cannot dodge them. And so it doesn't matter what I do with my mech because a lot of his attacks take half my health. And it's inevitable. If I can't dodge his attacks, I cannot win that fight because I am dead before I can even do anything. I talked about on the live show last night, a lot of other games have, difficulty modifiers. Maybe I just need a slight slowdown to give me the chance to dodge. And I think someone in the Discord even explained to me why it's so hard. I had never heard of iframes before this week, but there's no iframes in this apparently. So when you dodge in Dark Souls, apparently you're invincible for a brief period of time after you execute that. And that a lot of my strategy in these games is just mashing that dodge button and a lot of attacks will miss me. And that doesn't work in this. Every attack hits me unless you time it exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally like if a thing touches your mech, you're taking that damage.
So my experience with the bosses is there was no satisfaction in progression because it was trial and error, just mashing dodge randomly because I can't time it and can't adjust. And when I beat it, it's only because I got lucky that time and not as many of his attacks hit me. It wasn't down to any of my offensive strategy or anything like that. It was strictly like I got lucky and those big hitters didn't hit me that one time. But there was no reward there because it was like, well, yeah, I just did it for 5 hours and eventually I lucked out.
Yeah. I think, again, like what's frustrating is that most of the game, like regular missions, can be played without needing that tight of execution, right? You don't.
You have a room. You have a margin of error.
Yeah,
right?
there's a decent amount of margin of error. You get into the enemy AC duels, and that margin of error gets much tighter. But you are at least operating under the framework of, I am dueling with an enemy that is equivalent to me and works like me. And like you can find builds that cheese your way through them, or you can take advantage of their weaknesses. Like they are still limited by the player, like the same ways the player is. Then you get to these big bosses, and they are often like so overwhelmingly not following the rules. And again, like the rest of the game is not like that, so, and like, again, people will point at like Dark Souls bosses can be hard. Well, Dark Souls bosses often have much larger tells and much more specific attack patterns. And, the bosses in this are kind of the worst of both worlds. They both have like the janky hitboxes and ridiculous damage and, ridiculous slate of abilities that you can't access. But they also have the kind of speed and
Well, the speed is such a problem sometimes. Like I'm using the lock-on, but I struggle with the camera sometimes. And if you lose sight of them, you have no idea what attack they're firing off.
The
And by the time you get them back in your view, it's like
Yeah.
too late sometimes.
the boss at the end of chapter 4 is one of the fastest bosses in
It's
anything I've ever
horrifying,
seen.
dude.
Like it's like, and the thing is, like, I still actually enjoyed those fights once I finally got them down, but like again, like I said, it was 3 that really had me stumped. I think there's definitely some other bosses in this game, you know, even big scale bosses that do work differently that are very fun. Like there's one that has like a foundry thing on its back and you can fly over it and shoot down into that to like do stagger damage and stuff. Stuff like that's really cool.
Yeah, Derek and I were talking on the live show last night about like how unique some of the boss. I don't know if you consider like Strider a boss fight, but how unique some of the missions
Yeah, the Strider
are.
fight is really cool.
I love.
Yeah, but like
Yeah, I mean, by comparison to these boss fights, like the missions, some of the mission design is so good.
Like the missions, and like I think also generally, like I really loved the art style and vibe of this game. Like it just like as somebody that, you know, I haven't really watched much anime in a while, but like back when I was like a teenager and watched more of it, like this kind of like harkens back to a lot of the stuff that I watched, and like tone and presentation and just artistic design. And it's really awesome to see that like executed so well. Like some of these mech designs are phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
And also just the ability to mix and match. And like we talked a lot about just the gameplay customization, but there's a lot of personalization and everything as well. You can create your own emblems. There's a wide variety of emblems to put on. You can freely change the colors, put multiple levels of colors on it. You can control the weathering, and you can do that down individually to every single part and weapon on your mech.
you can make the trans rights bazooka.
Yeah, you can. I saw somebody that that made like an amazing like just giant beefy like trans rights mech that was pretty sweet.
love it.
And it had the color scheme down and everything. It looked awesome.
Oh, I did our SDGC colors on my mech,
Yeah.
right? I put my exact like R purple on there.
Yeah.
I used R magenta for the like light up LED elements. You know, yeah, and like it looked great. You know, I got to I loved spending that kind of time doing shit.
And I love that too. You know, it's something I love in games is customization and tinkering with stuff. Like I played 300 hours of Gran Turismo 7, and probably 50 of those hours were just spent in the photo mode, dicking around with paint decals and landscapes and stuff like that. So I definitely spent a good couple hours in Armored Core just in the hangar, just playing around with stuff. And like it is cool because it does play into like, you know, really one of the most rewarding parts of the game is like feeling like this mech is yours and built how you want it, and being able to reflect that like aesthetically as well as functionally is really, really fun.
We all just
And
want to
also
play
just-
dress up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, Jeff just mentioned something I want to mention. The game has a photo mode because you can pause this game. I want to add that you can actually
Dark Souls
pause
could
this
never.
game. Yeah. But yeah, do we have anything else we want to say about the difficulty? I know.
No, I
I know
mean, just
Jeff-
like I said, I think like the difficulty is going to be the main point of contention for most people, which is that the game is for the most part not that difficult, and it is in fact. Again, I say
it's a hard game, but like
Yeah.
it feels fair.
it's not
most of the time.
it's not challengeless, but it's mostly a reasonable difficulty.
It's approachable for most standard gamers, right? To like pick up and play and learn the systems and get pretty good at and have a great time until they hit one of those handful of bosses.
And I think I appreciate the design where the missions are intended to be manageable because you can do them repeatedly to make money.
Yes.
And that money is for parts to tackle the actual challenge,
And
which is some of these
sometimes
bigger
you will-
fights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes you will need to quit out of the mission, in which case
Yeah,
you do lose
it's-
the checkpoint, but then you can grind out some other missions, get some money, and then come back, with, some more parts and
It's
stuff.
just the age-old thing, right? Where we've beaten this horse to death, but a fight is not the same fight for all people of all
Yeah.
skills
And-
and of all abilities.
Right.
And
And
we're in 2023 now. Give people the options and flexibility just a little bit. Give them an inch.
You know
to-
what?
to
I
make-
found a trainer on PC, right? Because I was playing around with some of this stuff, and I found a mod where I could like reduce the speed by like 10% at a time. And I did an arena match at 50% speed with
my God.
like unlocked frame rate, right? So I mean, it's like it's super smooth. It was so crazy to do. And like, you know, again, like I always talk about, I wish there were XP multipliers in RPGs, and I straight up wish there was a speed toggle in this game, because everybody deserves the joy of doing an insane arena fight at like 50 or 60% speed. It's crazy.
And the thing too is that this game, like, I mean, there is multiplayer stuff, but it's more kind of set matches. It doesn't have like the invasion kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was
Like,
worried
the
this
Souls
would have invasion,
Yeah.
and if it happened, I was gonna fucking.
You got to go into the PvP arena. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it would have made a lot more sense to, you know, I mean, that's kind of the big excuse for not having some of that stuff because of online play stuff.
Yeah.
But like, it would have made a lot of sense to have that here, because this is primarily, you know, a single player game. It doesn't do the, you know, shared connected world thing.
You have to
know, there's no
manually
messages
enter
or
the
something.
mosh pit if you want to throw hands. So.
But I do want to say about the difficulty for me is, you know, I did have trouble with some of those bosses, and it was kind of funny because like one that I thought was way worse, like Jeff, you were talking about Sea Spider, and you actually beat it faster than I did.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
But like, I didn't have as much issue with Baltius as you did, and there's also like a mid-mission fight with an AC in that mission that I didn't have much issue with, but that was a problem for you. Like, it's just this game, like the level of difficulty worked very well for me personally. That's just because it clicked into a few things that I like for harder games, which is, you know, it's quick and easy to get in and out of the hard part and to, you know, to keep going over it and learning it.
Yeah.
That was an issue I've had with some of the Souls games where you have to do like a long walk back to the boss, and it can be dangerous and stuff. So it doesn't feel like I'm able to put the time in to like learn it, whereas I could here. You know, being able to change up my loadout, you know, on the mech worked very well for how my brain works. Like, and I've seen people say that, oh my God, this game's like harder than Sekiro. Sekiro is a game I could not finish. I have tried multiple times. I loved the core gameplay of it, but I had to give up because I could not do it. Whereas, you know, I have finished this game. I'm working on New Game Plus right now. And, you know, most of it wasn't that bad aside from those few aforementioned boss fights. And so, like, so I do say that as to maybe somebody that's like kind of put off on maybe Soul style of stuff, this might work better for you.
Yeah, it is a very meaningfully different kind of experience.
Yeah,
it's night and day. I just played Elden Ring earlier this year and gave up after 10 hours. Like, this is, like, despite my complaints, it's hands down more approachable than any.
Yeah.
Can I talk about the story a bit?
You can talk about the story a little bit.
Yeah, you could talk about the story.
Like, I mean,
well, so
it's hard. I want to say no spoilers, but like, A,
what can you spoil?
What can you spoil?
Like,
and also B, I think that the like somewhat more media savvy, like, I don't know how to say other than like I figured out the major plot twist of this game within the first like 30 minutes because I had watched Eureka 7. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, like this. The story here is just every mech trope thing.
It's kind of
together.
Literally just like Dark Souls, Eureka 7, Dune. Like, we mishmashed these three specific things together, and like, it rules. Do not get me wrong. It fucking rips. The vibes are immaculate.
Yeah, no, the vibe it gives is great. Like, but the you never see a human being in this game. I want to make that very clear. I think you never see a single human being in the entire time you're playing.
And again, this just might be like a personal thing. I don't know if it's my ADHD or my OCD, but like I like enjoying. I understand like the story, and this is not going to be Red Dead Redemption 2, but a story is a big part of enjoyment for games for me, and I can't fucking even tell you what's happening in this game. And I've listened to every conversation. I couldn't even tell you a character's name. The way it's presented, where it's just like words spoken with no faces, it's impossible for me to remember who's who. And it's cool. It sucks because there's a couple really cool cinematic moments, especially the intro to the first mission. I just wish there was like a little bit more flair in the storytelling, a little bit more traditional like cinematics, so at least for key plot points to kind of like catch me up to speed, because I've just given up. Like,
Yeah,
I could tell there's a cool. I don't know if it's tropey, but I could tell there's like something cool going on here, and I can't even
literally
comprehend it.
do not get context for a lot of the game until the end of chapter 4, and then they do some stuff with it in chapter 5.
The story's really backloaded.
Yeah.
Which, like, because there's only like 3 characters other than the player that are really you need to know about, and that's like the handler, it's Aerie, and it's Carla, right? It's those 3, and you've met all of them by early
and
in chapter
Rusty.
2.
Rusty.
Yeah, Rusty.
I like Rusty.
Yeah. But you know, what's interesting is that this does they've you know, I've said it even in this review that I hate to keep going back to Dark Souls, but like they have intentionally Dark Souls'd the plot of an Armored Core game, right? Where they've yet again like found a way to play, and it's a thing that FromSoft has really been leaning into in all of their games for a while, is the idea that like every FromSoft game is actually part of some endless cycle. And like they managed to incorporate that into Armored Core as well, to the point that like there's at least 2 different endings for that you can hit on your first run. But
so there's a total of 3 endings.
Okay, because I was gonna say I've read that
there's 2 endings you can get on the first 2 playthroughs, and then you can't get the true ending until you've gotten both of those and then gone through on New Game Plus.
Yeah. So
that's how it works.
Playing heavily into like the cyclical nature of things, I guess. But like also I've read that there's
definitely
I didn't mess with New Game Plus. And
I
think I need
just
to
actually,
because I'm reading that like many missions do change on a New Game Plus, like meaningfully.
Yeah, so I actually had just started it before we got on because I wanted to, see anything, and I was just, planning on just blasting through, chapter 1. One thing that is nice about New Game Plus in this one, it does do the same thing as the Souls games, where it just kind of throws you into New Game Plus the second you finish the game, but you can still replay all of the completed missions.
Oh, nice. That's good.
From your first playthrough, which is really nice. But yeah, there was one mission where all of a sudden, partway through, I got a transmission that was not a dialogue, like was not a conversation from the first game. And it actually gave me the option to betray my allies for, alternate boss fights and, an extra payout. And that was just, an early mission in chapter 1. So I'm really curious to see how that stuff goes, because I want to see what this game has to offer. And there are some missions that the endings are determined basically just based off of, there's a couple points where there's decision missions and just, choosing one or the other influences the ending. It's not as incomprehensible to get the endings as like, From's other games and stuff. But I'm definitely curious to see like every game has to offer, because I really enjoyed this game. And one thing I do want to mention is because it's something I've been harsh on FromSoft in a lot of their recent games is performance. A lot of their games do not run well on any platform.
And
while
and
this game
this
is
one
not
runs
perfect, it's not perfect. But like I played it in the performance mode on PS5, and it is mostly 60 FPS. It does drop at times, but like it's not like their other games where it's like in Elden Ring where, the game doesn't run great, and then all of a sudden the frame rate tanks in a cave with nothing. And you're just like, why? It's like at least like there's stuff going on and I can understand why it's dropping. It's not perfect, but I think the game looks very good. The art style is very well realized, and their implementation of HDR is fantastic, because a lot of things are, gray, not very vibrant, but then like you get these bright, vibrant colors of like the lights on the mechs and then thrusters and lasers and stuff, and it looks phenomenal. And load times are fast and everything. It's a lot more polished on that front than from.
I will say the PC port is really good. There's not like a ton of,
and that's something they've had issues with before too.
Oh, that's something they've had issues with for a long time.
Never forget the Dark Souls PC port. I was there.
Hey, like I made it through Elden Ring on PC, and that was a rough first couple weeks of that game's launch. I mean, honestly, I don't know if it ever got. I'm sure it eventually got really cleaned up, but by the time I beat it, it still had pacing issues. But yeah, like the PC port is really solid. It seems relatively well optimized. There's not like a ton of graphics settings, but it runs really, really well on like not top end hardware, and that's great. Because I feel like the kind of hardcore people who are really into PC gaming are probably the kind of people who are going to fall hard for a game like Armored Core, right? That feels like a good platform match. So,
and Jeff, you played it on Xbox Series S, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how was it there? I'm curious, just because it is cool that we all played it on different platforms and stuff too, so we can kind of.
I'm gonna give you, there's the objective review and the Jeff review. I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to graphics and performance, just because like I come from 90% PC gaming background, so I'm used to playing stuff at high resolutions and high frame rates. And it sucks because the combat of this would feel great at a lock 60 or even at 100 FPS. But I will say, I've played a share of both last gen and current gen games on my Xbox Series S. This is definitely one of the better ones. The image is a bit soft because it is 1080p, but 1080p is like, there's a lot of Series S games that aren't even running at 1080p these days. So, I mean, that's props. Other than shadows, they didn't really have to cut back on any settings. So like, aside from the resolution dip, the rest of the image is still largely true. You aren't losing a ton of detail beyond that. Performance, hearing that it's not perfect on other consoles, then it makes sense. It definitely is very, very rarely 60, and I think I saw this in the Digital Foundry video as well. Mostly it's in the low to mid 50s, which with a VRR display is not a huge issue. It definitely doesn't feel bad to play, and it absolutely feels. It doesn't, when it dips, it feels like it's a frame rate dip. It doesn't feel like the pacing jitter that you get with the Souls games and with that we had with Elden Ring. So
or like the random stutters and stuff.
Yeah. Like you said, it makes sense. That Strider mission with the dust particles in the desert, or just massive battles, lots of explosions going on. It dips when you expect it to. But it's very good, and it's definitely one of the best. Like considering it's a current gen release on Xbox Series S, this tiny little console that I guess a lot of developers are struggling with. I think it's a very commendable port and a very good version for anyone to play.
Yeah, cool. I mean, like, we've kind of covered like every aspect of it we can without straight up spoiling like stuff that should be surprises. But it's just a good game, and it's something that's very unlike anything that's come out in a while. Like the era of the pure action game feels like it's long gone. Right. And it's only occasionally that something like this comes out that feels like it's meant to be this like, fast adrenaline pumping, sort of thing. And
they didn't go and make it the sad dad robot game.
Yeah. This is butt rock, like super fast giant robots, firing a billion missiles and dodging all of them. Like, this shit rips. Like, if you grew up,
something's coming in on the radar.
Yeah,
that we didn't.
It's a Gundam. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's
definitely makes you want to go watch Pacific Rim immediately.
It's got all the you're pretty good.
Yeah. This is mecha anime in playable form in the like I kept playing this and being like, I fucking wish a Gundam game existed that played remotely like this, right? Like, that's the sad thing. But yeah, it's just really good. It is broadly so much more approachable than you would think, given FromSoft's reputation and Armored Core's historical reputation. But like, those boss fights are, for a lot of people, going to be the anchor that weighs the experience down. I think even despite that, you're likely to find a lot to love in this game.
I would like testify to that. Yeah, it's all right. No, I was talking with Justin, and Justin's been a big help to me getting through this with tips and stuff. It wasn't even a boss. There was like an optional mission I was doing where just a random enemy just fucking pissed me off so much I uninstalled the game. I was like, I've played enough to give a review on it, and I'm done. But an hour or two later, I just came back and reinstalled it because there is.
Well, thankfully, it was an optional mission too.
Yeah, that's true. But like, there's just this. It's got that. It gets into your brain in that way a lot of good games do, where there's enough good elements and enough satisfaction in other areas that like it does make you want to come back, and I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And I know for me, like, I finished this game, quite a bit earlier this week, but like I've been thinking of it and like wanting to play it ever since then. I just started up a New Game Plus run just because I just want to play this. Like I've got other stuff that I do want to play, but I really kind of want to keep playing this. I think this is my current front runner for Game of the Year. Although this year is nuts and I still haven't played everything that's out and stuff. So.
But like in an insane year, this game has managed to stand out for me.
And for me, and I say this as a positive, but it really does kind of feel like a PS2 game in that, like, I don't know, it just has that weird.
It has the magic of
made by people that are really passionate about that weird niche appeal.
This feels like a game. It brings to mind the feeling of being back in that like GameCube and PS2 era and picking something up like on a whim and finding out it was the sickest game you'd ever played. Like this is clearly not a PS2 game, but I think there's a lot of that magic of that era of where games didn't have to follow the same conventions and games could be, you know, big, weird, experimental, creator driven. And that's what Armored Core 6 feels like. It feels like that.
But also like it's got that simplicity, right? Where you said it's just doing missions and building parts and fighting robots. There's no crafting. There's no skill trees.
Yes.
I mean, there to an extent, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. It wants you to spend your time like putting pieces together, right? For like the exact robot you want and then doing sick shit with that robot. And like that's, if that appeals to you, then you should be playing this game. And if that doesn't appeal to you, we're very different people. For lack of a better term. So,
but yeah, this game just put a huge smile on my face. Sometimes it would just be like, you know, the stuff that you'd pull off or just the way things were presented mid-mission. You know, and also just sometimes just, hey, I made a really cool looking mech. Let's go see what this thing can do.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was just
let's go drift these tank legs.
There was just a lot of like little satisfactions I got constantly throughout playing this game. That really kind of put a smile on my face and got its hooks in. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, we got anything else to say, or has that pretty much got it out of us? We've gone at this a lot longer than most reviews.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure.
But I think we all had a lot to say, so. All right, well, that sounds like that's it. Well, folks, thank you all for joining us for this review, and thank you again to Bandai Namco for providing us with a review code, giving us the opportunity to review this game and cover it. Just a reminder, you can find us live most Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for SDGC Live, our live weekly news roundup. And if there's nothing else I can think of, and if there was, I would have put it earlier. As John likes to say, kindness costs nothing.